So we're moving on now to our keynote speaker this afternoon, who is Jonathan Bagley, the Chief Executive of Pshe Associations, which is a national body for personal, social health and economic education. Previously, Jonathan was the Head of Education at the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre and played an active role in online safety policy in the UK for many years, most recently as the Chair of the UK Council for Child Internet Safety's Education Group. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be here and at what sounds like it's been a really inspiring conference, and just to hear about from Unitas about that work, about really preparing young people with complex needs, challenging behaviours, but helping them walk out into the world and thrive is really so much about what we're trying to do at the Pshe Association as well. So, got quite a grand title, Understanding the Behaviour of Young People Online. I'm not sure whether I will live up to that title, but I just really probably just want to leave you with a couple of key themes. As Geeta said, I was Head of Education at the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, thinking a lot about young people and technology, and I suppose trying to keep pace with technological change and young people's behaviour, and probably largely failing. Because as we all know, young people have always been real innovators in the use of technology, really on the kind of the cutting edge of integrating technology into their social lives and into their daily practices. And I think as a result, sometimes for those of us who didn't grow up with the internet, with smartphones as an extra limb, it can seem quite opaque, their behavior, what's happening. And it can seem like a challenge to understand. And I suppose if there's just one theme that I want to, if it's really to say, it's absolutely crucial that we are not overawed by the technology. That when we think about young people's behavior online, we see young people first and technology second. And I just want to explore what really, I suppose, what that means for some of the thinking in education around young people's behavior online. So just a brief bit about the Pshe Association. We are the national body for personal, social health and economic education. That's the bit of the curriculum that teaches about sex and drugs and mental health and physical health and extremism, and in simplest terms, though, tries to prepare young people for life. We're a membership body and provide support to many, many teachers and schools around the country. But our basic mission is to improve the quality of Pshe and the status of the subject, because we really believe it should be a central plank in any strategy for improving the health, safety, well-being and life chances of children and young people in this country. So a few of the things that we do, we provide overarching curriculum of Pshe. We provide guidance on teaching about sort of particularly tricky issues like emotional health and mental health and emotional well-being, teaching about consent, as well as sort of resources on more specific topics like peer-on-peer abuse, which is this piece we did for the Home Office, and guidance on overarching strategies for tackling things like relationships and sex education. But another big part of our work is about campaigning for change, campaigning to get statutory status in the curriculum for Pshe, because at the moment it's a non-compulsory subject, and that means there's a real patchwork around the country. And all of the evidence shows that Pshe can improve young people's health, their employability skills, and also their academic attainment, and that has the greatest impact on young people, the most disadvantaged young people as well. So for us, as I say, it needs to be a central plank in any strategy. But importantly, why is this relevant when we're thinking about young people online? Well, Pshe has to be a subject which starts from where young people are. It has to respond to their world, the world that they're growing up in, and the things that they know already, the things they think, the things they feel about things, and it needs to help them develop their understanding, because it is the subject that aims to improve young people's knowledge, skills, and attributes, things like confidence and self-esteem, both now to deal with the world that they face in their day-to-day lives, but also in the future. And when we think about technology, we think about the future, let's think about what that actually means. Because the child entering school this year, 5 years old, running through the gates of primary school with a healthy lunchbox and excitement about the joy of learning, will leave in the year 2030. How futuristic does that sound? I mean, the year 2000 still sounds futuristic, and apparently it's ages ago. So what are we really preparing children for? Is it going to be more like this? Are they going to be sort of DNA splicing, mind-melding cyborgs, downloading their consciousness onto the World Wide Web? Well, some people certainly think so. This is Ray Kurzweil, the sort of very excitable futurologist who believes humans will become hybrids by 2030 with tiny robots scurrying around our brain to help us think. I don't know about you, but I mean, that sounds itchy and not a future I want for my own child. But thankfully, when we think about the future, we tend to get it wrong. Here's a vision of the future from the 1890s. This was the year 2000 as predicted then, and you can see the futuristic drapes and the futuristic upright piano, and of course this contraption here, which was going to emancipate maids from the drudgery of housework. And you can see it's a kind of Heath Robinson Victorian contraption, because of course we can only see the future through the lens of our own understanding of technology, of society and culture. But I think it helps to think, when we think about how do we understand young people's behavior today, let's think about what it would mean to try to understand their behavior in the future. What's the constant? Well, technology will change, but of course, young people will still be young people. If we think about young people now, last year, this is the Ofcom Media Literacy Tracker. If you want data on what young people are doing online, it's the only kind of longitudinal study in this country worth looking at. Last year, you see here, age 5 to 15, for the first time, spending time on the internet overtook TV and gaming. For the first time, so for 5 to 15-year-olds, they're spending more time on the internet than they are watching television. Now, of course, this is totally unsurprising, and let's not forget that lots of them are watching TV on YouTube through the internet. But what does this mean for us? How should we interpret this in terms of our understanding of young people? Well, there's one way that we tend to think about this, and it's understandable, and particularly for those of you, which I'm sure is all of you in this room working with young people with complex needs, challenging behaviors in really challenging environments, we tend to think about it through the prism of risk. And these are some of the things that we've had to think about over the last 5, 10 years. Things like online extremism, radicalization, online grooming, young people's proximity to cybercrime, the ability to, whether that's buying drugs off the dark web, hacking your friends, or hacking the Pentagon. These are all new opportunities and challenges that young people now face that they didn't face before. Things like sexting as well. So yes, there are new risks, and that can make us feel like, God, put the internet back in a box, tape it up and throw it in the sea. But let's just think about this for a sec. Let's think about risk. I just want you all to take a moment and think about your favorite place to play as a child. Has everyone got somewhere? Can you stand up if it was outside? Okay, so that's quite a lot of you. Can you stay standing if it was outside of all adult supervision? Okay, I don't think anyone... Okay, sit down. I just make this point because, my favorite place to play as a child was a building site. To ride my bike down the stairs that hadn't been finished, and I'm genuinely massively risk averse. We have this understanding that when we were kids, we'd play outside and we'd take all of these risks, but increasingly, the data does show, young people are spending more and more time inside. If you ask young people today, as you well know, most of them will probably say their favorite place is to play outside as well, but increasingly that time is being spent inside, it's being spent online, and inevitably, both the risks they're exposed to and the risks they might take are going to be online as well. But let's not forget, the kids haven't changed. There's a wonderful line in the film The Breakfast Club, which has that, the kids haven't changed, you have. And I try to remind myself of that every day. This is from Dana Boyd, a fantastic American academic who wrote a book called It's Complicated, which is worth looking out if you're interested in this field. It says, teens hang out, gossip, flirt, people watch, joke around, and jockey for status. These dynamics are at the heart of teen life. So they relish any opportunity to log in and engage with their peers. People talk about young people being constantly glued to their phones, being addicted to technology. Now, let's be under no illusions. There are some very concerning trends in technological development that are, app developers talk about addictivity and making things more addictive. And anyone who's currently playing Candy Crush right now will know that. But the point is that it's not just technology. It is about communication. It's the same as when I would run home, get on the phone, and be on the phone for 5 hours. It's the same thing. So when we think about what we can do for young people, how we can respond, what can we give them? Well, here's one example of what we could give them. I think we all have this kind of innate understanding that in the real world, we can't wrap our kids in cotton wool, no matter how much we might like to sometimes. That of course, we have to support young people. We have to do everything we can to mitigate risk and prevent them being exposed to real harm. But at some level, we have to help them navigate those the dangers that are out there. And here's one sort of, I suppose, extreme example of this. This is a photograph from an adventure playground in North Wales in an area of quite significant socioeconomic deprivation, and this is called The Land. And in The Land, there are basically no rules for young people, and you can see it's, health and safety not gone mad. They can set fire to things, they can build stuff, use hammers, use extremely dangerous tools. Now, obviously, there are youth workers there, but when they do risk assessments, they do risk-benefit assessments. And the one for fire runs to 9 pages, but it is not only looking at the risks of fire, it's also the benefits of safely working together to build fires, the community aspect of it, and all the different things that you might gain from engaging in that sort of activity. And obviously, you need to create a very safely managed space. But I think in the real world, we understand that risky play is important. And indeed, that sort of understanding is backed up by science as well. Because a recent sort of literature review looking at the role of risk in play in young children found that risk in play promotes learning of risk management strategies, which are fundamental for children to keep themselves safe in the diverse situations typical in daily life. Now, risky play is very tightly defined as play at height, so climbing trees, play near dangerous elements, so bodies of water, play at speed, so riding your BMX downstairs, and things like rough and tumble. I don't know what that is, but it's very scientific. But importantly, and the thing that really jumped out for me in this is that experience with managing risks during childhood has also been associated with the ability to negotiate decisions about substance use, relationships, and sexual behavior during adolescence. That actually that experience of learning in a safe way to navigate risky play helps young people when they're older to navigate the sorts of risks that they're going to face then. Now, obviously, this isn't about just giving a 3-year-old a machete and telling them to get on with it. But we do have an understanding of what that might look like to actually teach young people about how to use tools, for instance. So what does that mean online? And I think for me, this is one of the most kind of vexing questions for education and for youth work, that what could it mean? Now, one of the suggestions that has come up about trying to move away from a paradigm that always sees risk as synonymous with harm, but actually seeing something around, and I know there's a lot of talk about the concept of resilience, but thinking about, yes, exposure to risk leads to harm, but not equally for everyone, and that different people have different abilities to navigate those risks at different times in their lives. And I think when you look at the literature into resilience itself, one of the key things, for me anyway, is about the fact that we're not talking about something that's a trait that you have. It's not a stiff upper lip that you've either got it or you don't. Resilience is a process. It's, as Tony Newman said, the promotion of resilience, well, as Catherine Panter said, a process to harness resources, to sustain well-being. Those might be internal resources that could be built up, but it's also external resources as well. It's also your family, your friends, your support workers, the people around you are all crucial to your ability to navigate and respond to risk. And it's not simply a matter of eliminating risk factors, as the successful management of risk is a resilience-promoting factor in itself. And this, again, when we're thinking about online, comes into some of the really thorny issues about do you, in really tricky cases, do you actually stop a young person from engaging with technology at all, which on the one hand might remove them from that risk, but also removes them from all the social connections they may have had there. And I'm not saying that this is easy, because there are times when that might be the decision you need to make, but we need to think in that terms, what's the ecosystem around a child to support them when in their online activities? So what might this mean online? What might digital resilience mean? Well, there's some work going on from the UK Council for Child Internet Safety thinking about digital resilience. They've sort of identified 4 main things, one of which is about digital activation, which basically means learning through experience. That there's some interesting research into parenting strategies in young people that shows that actually parenting strategies that just set up filters and stop young people doing things, or even ones where the parents are sitting down with the child to do things, actually have limited impact on risk, whereas strategies that enable young people to explore these things in a managed way are much more successful. Of course, young people need education to help them recognize risks, but that's not just about digital literacy and technical skills, but it's also about emotional skills like self-regulation, self-control. And this is coming back to my point. That's exactly the same when we think about risk in the real world. These are not new things. We understand that we need to help young people self-regulate, but we need to apply this online. And as I've said, fostering supportive networks in a broader context. So this is one of the things that we're trying to do through PSHE, and that a good program of PSHE delivered through schools will be a developmental program building on young people's skills and understanding, but has a skills-based approach to learning and takes a positive approach. I think one of the the sort of challenges for internet safety is, I think in the early years, we didn't learn from what was known in drug education. We didn't learn from the fact that actually if you just say no, you can make things worse. We thought that if we just showed young people videos about pedophiles, they'd stop going on the internet. Rather than trying to build those much broader skills and being positive about what is, of course, a fundamental part of day-to-day life, not just for young people, but for all of us. And of course, building those psychosocial aspects, confidence, resilience, and building self-esteem as well. So we're delighted that if you haven't been paying attention to the sort of government announcements around PSHE, there is a consultation on whether to make PSHE compulsory, and if it's relevant for your work at all, I would ask you to look out for it and support the idea that PSHE in its broadest form, not just sex and relationships education, but drugs and alcohol, mental health, and digital literacy, is a fundamental part of, from the perspective of prevention generally, critical, from the perspective of supporting young people and diverting them away from the youth justice system in the first place, also can play a critical role. We have 5 priorities for that, which is very simple. We think if you're going to do this, you need to do it regularly. It's not enough just to do one-off assemblies about drugs or sex and relationships. It's got to be a whole subject, looking at all of the things that young people might be having to respond to now and in the future. And of course, teachers need training, and we need this in all schools so that no young person is goes without this entitlement to what we believe is absolutely essential learning. So I know that many of you won't be working directly in education, but if you are, do come to us. You can join the association and get access to lots of resources, but also we're very interested in whether there is more that we could be doing in youth offending, in the secure estate generally, in education. So if there are any of you who would be interested in engaging on that, it's something very nascent stages, but do drop us an email or come and talk to me afterwards. So in simplest terms, as I say, when thinking about technology, when trying to understand young people's behavior online, it is both as simple and as complicated as trying to understand young people's behavior. And if we start from the young people and not from the technology, we can also draw on all of the resources that you all have in working with young people. You should never be overawed by the latest app, because I'm sure you all know how to talk to young people and ask them questions about it, and that is the starting point. So I hope you have an excellent rest of the afternoon, and do come and have a chat if you're interested in learning any more. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Lots for us to think about as we go forward to the workshops. So if you could all go to the afternoon workshops now, please, and do come back after, because we have got our panel with young people and we would like to hear from them. Thank you very much.